Welcome back to Seattle Sucks, a podcast about hating the city that we love. It's me, I'm Colin. I'm here with Greg, and I think, Greg, you're on the floor, right? Okay.
Can confirm Greg is on the floor. He's tapping the floor with his finger. That's how he communicates now.
Well, thank you, Brian. How are you doing?
Colin, honestly, doing bad.
Oh, no.
Right. Yeah. I won my fantasy team, just got the shit kicked out of it because I had Carson Wentz on my fantasy team and the other person had DK Metcalf. So that went well today. But football, my beloved pastime, my beloved sport, had its most awful showing and maybe most entertaining showing this week when the Denver Broncos were unable to field a single quarterback because all four of their quarterbacks had COVID-19 and the NFL forced them to play the game anyway.
COVID stay winning.
with a wide receiver at quarterback. And if you're curious what it's like to have a wide receiver that hasn't thrown a pass since 2017 when he was in college, what it's like to have him quarterback your team. This young man's name was Kendall Hinton. He was on the practice squad, meaning he had not even been in a team meeting until the Saturday before the game, the day before the game. And he went 1 for 9 for 13 yards and 2 interceptions, which is quite a feat. And honestly, I just feel bad for the guy. That shit sucks. That's awful. And it was so funny too because the Broncos coaching staff refused to give him easy passes too. You could do little short screen passes or just little 6-yard slants, things like that, right? Refused to do any of that. They're like, no, you fucking bomb that shit down the field. And the Saints defensive backs were when they were intercepting the ball, you could tell they were laughing as they were intercepting the passes. It was one of the most awful things ever put on television, and all thanks to the greed of the NFL, who refused to take the hit by delaying the game.
Well, now hang on.
And COVID-19.
Hang on now. Isn't that just good sportsmanship? Shouldn't they have just played the game? If we're going to go through this insane charade in this country of trying to hyper normalize COVID, so where we're just going on about our lives, isn't that the sportsman thing to do in that scenario, is just to play the game?
Well, that was the excuse that was given.
Sure. Yeah, I buy that.
The NFL and others.
This is a stupid country. It's terrible that we're pretending this doesn't exist, and football is dumb. So, inside of that logic, it makes sense. They should have played.
Well, some people pointed out that when people pointed to that and said, "Hey, this is just like any other injury. You got to play." Other people pointed out, "Well, that's interesting because the Baltimore Ravens have 22 players right now with COVID-19 on the team." And their game got delayed day after. It's now been delayed 3 times and will be played on Wednesday so they can attempt to field a team, which they also won't be able to on Wednesday.
Okay.
But you might ask, why does one team get 3 delays and the other team just has to play on their given day? And the answer is the Baltimore Ravens are a playoff-bound team with Super Bowl aspirations and a star quarterback that people want to watch. And the Denver Broncos are awful and nobody likes them.
So it sounds like the Ravens, for that reason, put up a fight, and the Broncos were like, yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter, let's play. Which, again, good on them for the sportsmanship of that. Also, you've been complaining about this all evening, Brian, but I think you should consider yourself incredibly lucky to have witnessed such an incredible football spectacle. Well, I mean, when are you ever going to see something so absurd as that? You're blessed. You're blessed.
Yeah, it's truly fascinating, and it also I think you're right, Greg, in a sense, as much as I hate to say it, but I mean, this is exactly what I posted on Twitter too. Is that this is just the charade, right? This is the charade we're living through. Is we're just going to pretend like everything's normal when, that was the whole reason why they started football again besides the TV contracts, the actual reason. But the supposed social good was that, this is how we get the country back to normal in this crisis. And, this is going to help people through the crisis. You get a million, comments on it during the games that they're helping people through the crisis by playing football again. And it's like, no, this is just our everyday life where we just pretend nothing's happening, even though right in front of our eyes, the stupidest fucking thing in the world is happening. Right?
Well, the real takeaway for me is this, like what you opened with, Brian, and the thing you've actually been complaining about all night is how fucked you are in your fantasy league, which just tells me like the lesson there is that football is so fucking incredibly boring that to be able to watch it, you have to like be also playing a game within the game that has like social interaction and stakes, all completely independent of football itself.
Greg, thanks for being the first person to notice that sports have interactivity with the fans and whatnot. But yeah, no, football is incredibly fun to watch. Not so much fun to watch when a practice squad wide receiver is having to start on a team. Why even watch the game? And if the Denver Broncos had any fucking balls at all, what they would have done is just not taken the field and just told the NFL to go fuck itself and just not give it anything. Or as I saw somebody had posted, which was the smart move, which they should just kneeled every fucking play and made it even more unwatchable. But of course, that's not the world that we live in. That's
on what, based on like what political valence, like just again, because just in the terms of the like what to the dignity of football and them as players, no, the opposite is true. The sportsmanlike thing was to go on and play the game to the best of their abilities. If you're talking about like some kind of organized, conscious, like political statement, like, I mean, what country and sport are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the point, right? And I mean, the statement for the players that they should have made was that it's not worth risking serious, horrifying injury to, again, engage in just a obvious charade that only exists. The only reason this game happened was so that NFL didn't have to pay a penalty to whatever network was granted the rights to that game. Like, that basically is the entire reason for that game happening.
Because people want their football.
And could you imagine, I don't think there was any serious injuries in the game, but could you imagine if you like blew your fucking knee out and ruined your career in that fucking debacle?
Yeah, it's like
disaster.
Any other game, Brian. Yeah. I mean,
at least in the other games, you're, I guess, playing for something. But this is, you basically forfeited, but when you took the field, you forfeited. Basically, the second you took the field, you were
sportsmanship. I keep coming back to this. Like, does this mean nothing to you? These men went out there, they had dignity, and they played.
Well,
you can't take that away from them, Brian.
In college football, they showed sportsmanship, and the Wisconsin-Minnesota game, the longest continual rivalry in college football history, dating back to 1890, was canceled. Paul Bunyan's axe. Who knows who will have it this year? Because too many people at both schools have COVID.
Well, so that's the lesson to me is if you don't want to play your game, then it's time to have some COVID parties.
Time for a smooch fest in the locker room. But yeah, it's getting, I mean, we're all living this fantasy that everything's okay and that we aren't living through just an absolute enormous catastrophe. And it is kind of funny to see it kind of tear at the seams in these sort of products like, the NFL and things like that, where you have a team, with a 54-man roster that has 22 players with COVID on it, like it is entertaining to see this and be like, oh, I'm not crazy. Everything is a giant disaster, but I guess we're just going to play through it. As Greg says, we're going to be sportsmen about it. We're just going to play
just like
through
America
it.
is sportsmanlike about COVID. We're taking our L's and we're playing through it.
Well, that wasn't the only bad news. Just kidding. No, some good news happened this week too. I saw this article in the Stranger. Oh, I'm struggling to find it now. This article is headlined, "The Martial Law Band Takes the Spirit of Chop to the Nation." And so we're excited to hear that that band that used to play at the Chop is like a functional outfit, I guess. I just thought it was randos going up on stage.
Everything's got to start somewhere, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah. They're the awfully named Martial Law Band, and I think their album's called 12th and Pine. I don't know if I can get behind any of this, but they are putting out an album. I hate all music, so I guess I'm not the critic to respond to this. But as the stranger said, they have taken the spirit of the chop to the nation. So basically, the first, place that we know of to answer the call of the martial law band was Mac's Pub on Staten Island in New York, who's declared itself an autonomous zone so that it does not have to abide by the COVID restrictions that the state of New York and the city of New York have placed on them. And as Fox News, in interviewing as the owners said, they've taken a page of the Seattle playbook and declared themselves an autonomous zone.
Checkmate, Governor Cuomo.
Now, this is very funny for a variety of reasons, in that I don't think that because they saw this all on Fox News, they're unaware of what the autonomous zone was actually like, which means being attacked by the police about every 3 hours every day that you're in existence. But, good on them, I guess, for taking up the spirit and creating their own anarchist, syndicalist autonomous zone inside the police hellhole that is Staten Island. Now, one thing that I will say is that as much as these guys are kind of funny to laugh at, make fun of, and that little video of them on Fox News is funny, they are right in a way. Like, they are getting fucked.
Yeah.
Like, they're not wrong. Well, they might be wrong to open up, but they're not wrong that they're getting fucked.
That they have no choice. That they are faced with bad choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, these people, these are probably like the worst kind of small business tyrants. They probably have treated their employees like complete shit.
In traditional New York or traditional Staten Island fashion, it's run by a Irish American and an Italian American, which means this place was already going to go under for gambling debts and, alcoholism. But again, that being said, they make this comment where they say, hey, we see a lot of stores that are a lot bigger than us, that have a lot more people than us, where people are allowed to just roam around in there. But for some reason, we have to close.
Yeah. And of course, it's easy to say, the some reason is people have their masks off and are eating in your restaurant. Mm-hmm. And that's true. But it's still true that at the end of the day, these people are seeing the absolute, the bald contradictions and just lunacy in our response to all this, and it doesn't make sense to them, and they're feeling fucked by it, and they're right, because could be doing what every other developed country in the world is doing, which is paying restaurateurs to stay closed because ostensibly we want to have a society after this that includes restaurants, and yet right now we need to not have them. So but they're not making up they're not getting that help, right? So no sympathy for these, I'm sure just absolute shitheads.
Well, they're on Staten Island, so shitheadness confirmed.
Yeah. But listen, this is similar to, so the biggest news in our COVID hell, I think, the last week, is that the Supreme Court weighed in on, again, this is directly in New York. The first case, this was made news because, for a lot of reasons, including this, the first case from Amy Coney Bryant, an actual decision that she sat in on, as far as I know. And basically, someone sued, there was a big crackdown on religious services being held in New York, and they were fining this Jewish synagogue that had held this massive wedding that people were shitting on the pictures of. Of course, it's like a Hasidic synagogue that was just enormous, like a stadium-sized synagogue filled with people in matching clothes for a wedding, maskless, and that shit sucks. But so the Supreme Court weighed in. Somebody sued, whatever. I don't know the details of the case really, but the Supreme Court weighed in, and it went 5-4 with Roberts politically siding against it. They found in favor of these churches that want to stay open on First Amendment grounds. And I'll read just a brief passage from Gorsuch's.
It begins that at the Church of Moloch, we all agree must stay open.
Okay, so this is Gorsuch in the opinion in favor of the churches. At the same time, the governor has chosen to oppose no capacity restrictions on certain businesses he considers, quote, essential. And it turns out the businesses the governor considers essential include hardware stores, acupuncturists, and liquor stores, bicycle repair shops, certain signage companies, accountants, lawyers, and insurance agents are all essential too. So at least according to the governor, it may be unsafe to go to church, but it is always fine to pick up another bottle of wine, shop for a new bike, or spend the afternoon exploring your distal points and meridians. Who knew public health would so perfectly align with secular convenience? And as almost everyone on the court today recognizes, squaring the governor's edicts with our traditional First Amendment rules is no easy task. People may gather inside for extended periods in bus stations and airports, in laundromats and banks, in hardware stores and liquor shops. No apparent reason exists why people may not gather subject to identical restrictions in churches or synagogues, especially when religious institutions have made plain that they stand ready, able, and willing to follow all the safety precautions required of essential businesses, and perhaps more besides. The only explanation for treating religious places differently seems to be a judgment that what happens there just isn't as, quote, essential as what happens in secular spaces.
Yeah, and I think basically that whole statement is actually correct, right? Except for one point, right? Which is the unsaid part, which is what goes on in the church is unessential because it's not part of the economy, right? And that's what this really has all been about, is that Black Friday can't be marred, right? That we got to keep people going into stores and buying shit because we refuse to do what other countries have done, which is pay people to stay home.
Yeah. Yeah. So these people are like an insane conservative cult. They are Catholic reactionary American psychos. And they are motivated, as a lot of people have pointed out. I mean, this is a lot of the response to it, right? Is like, oh, they're these crazy Catholics on the court. They're just motivated by their wacky religious dogmas and their like culture war politics. And yeah, this is absolutely true. Of course they are. Yeah. They are fucking high-fiving each other. Like being able to like do a real serious like First Amendment like smackdown on New York State, and by extension anyone else who tries to do this in the country, on like real like strict First Amendment religious grounds, like about the state like limiting the right to peaceably gather like for religious purposes. Like they all went home and got sloppy head from their trad spouses, right? Like this is like this is making their day. They all got little medals at their next like Opus Dei ceremony. This is what they're about, okay? But it doesn't. But that's because that's the country we live in. Like the reason they're right is because look, also the Constitution is stupid. I think it sucks, and I think the Supreme Court should be abolished. But there are two basic readings of the provisions for religion, the First Amendment. The text is something to the effect of Congress shall pass no law respecting the establishment of religion. There are two basic readings of that. One is that, government cannot infringe upon religious institutions in any way. Another is that, and a much better, sane and workable and good interpretation would be that government cannot specifically impose itself on religious institutions, so single them out with rules or legislation that apply only to them in a prejudicial way. That's the more reasonable interpretation of the First Amendment religious provision. In practice in America, we have like a mishmash that is, because all of this is politically contested and always has been. And so we have like compromises. So the fact that we have like the broad separation of church and state, which is just one element of possible, implication for the First Amendment, that is sort of been balanced out politically by the dumb thing that churches don't have to pay taxes. Basically, they were bought off for the separation of church and state. That's sort of been the agreement broadly over American history, where a better interpretation, as it is sometimes in some cases interpreted would be that, of course, churches have to pay taxes because not having them not pay taxes is singling them out, right? Is a special treatment, is special consideration. So yes, this is religious bullshit. And yeah, of course it's bad. Of course it's bad that now all these churches are going to feel emboldened to go out and like hold services full force, whatever. And they're going to be backed up by the Supreme Court. But you want to get pissed about this. Like, again, it's like everything else. It comes down to, don't get mad at the fucking conservatives. They're just doing their thing in our awful system. Like, you want to get pissed off at the Democratic governors who are supposedly at the forefront of fighting COVID, but are actually doing nothing, because this whole argument that Gorsuch is making here is based on the more reasonable interpretation of the First Amendment in this case, that government can't specifically single out religious institutions in a specific way. And he's arguing pretty convincingly that is in effect what's going on, because the overall response to COVID, specifically in the like closures mandated by these states, is so scant and small and performative that the churches make up a big part of it, and there's no good argument for why that is, because the sort of like just go along with it, we're doing the science here, like we're the smart liberal technocrats, Jay Inslee and Governor Cuomo doing the science here argument, if you don't, is just like, don't think about it, because it's like, look, yeah, we're not really locking down the economy. We're not sending people home from work. We've accepted we're not going to do any of that. We're not going to close down the entire economy, pay people to stay home, and do all the testing and contact tracing that we would need to be able to reopen safely again. We're not going to do that. So you just have to buy that we're going to perform the most obvious, the most heinous things that obviously we do have to lock down because they're absurd, are restaurants. And then anything else that we can show that we're locking down, because as you said, we can get away with it without it being like, without affecting the economy too badly, like churches that, again, as Gorsuch is basically saying, don't like fall in the liberal imagination of the liberal secular imagination, like don't rank as essential and important. He's not wrong there, right? So the problem here is that we're not doing enough. So this argument actually makes perfect sense, because we're barely doing anything. Such that closing down these churches is actually like a huge part of what is being asked for in places like New York.
Yeah, and it's basically every state is basically in their effort to look like they're doing something while actually doing nothing, is moving to just shut down the political groups that they feel least affect them personally, right? So Cuomo probably feels like, if we shut down the churches or whatever, that doesn't have like a huge political impact on me, right? Whereas in Texas, the first thing is always to shut down the bars, right? And that was a joke because it's an unsympathetic group of people, right? Close all the bars, right? Has almost no impact on the economy, and the people who get hurt by it are unsympathetic. And, maybe you'll take that side that they are unsympathetic characters, maybe like the people in the Staten Island bar or whatever, unsympathetic characters. But the thing is they're right when they point out that there is no difference between, what they do and what other groups are allowed to stay open do, right? And Gorsuch even says, like, look, you can impose limits on the churches and tell them that people have to have their masks on, and you can impose limits on how many people can be in the church, right? But you can't just tell them to shut down, right? And then leave all this other shit open.
Yeah.
And it just speaks to the scattershot method or approach to the COVID crisis, which is all about looking like you're doing something while actually doing as little as humanly fucking possible in order to keep the economy sort of rolling, right? And it's been a giant disaster. And, to the extent that like, people are at church for a longer period of time, unlike the person who goes to Carl's Jr. or whatever. Well, yeah, the customer at Carl's Jr. might get through quickly. What about all the poor fucks in the back? They're in there doing 8 and 10 hour shifts, right? What about the humans that actually
for months on end while we haven't actually gotten this under control, right? Because that's the other part. It's not just about locking down. Countries that are doing this better have not had to lock down for the last 6, 7, 8 months.
Yeah.
They've locked down for short periods and had a lot of other things going on. And they've locked down fully, like to a large degree, and paid people to stay home so that it actually worked in concert with other things like a functioning health system, broad testing, and contact tracing. But like, we're not doing any of that. And so, it is, look, you could throw a counterfactual at this and say, well, if we were doing all this stuff, like there was a broad response, including broad lockdowns that were where provisions were made for people to make that actually possible. Like it was an ideal scenario like that. Maybe some, Catholics and Hasids would get together and sue, and maybe all other things being equal, like, Amy Kobe Bryant being on the court, maybe they would rule the exact same way and you maybe use a different argument. We'll never know. Okay. Yeah. We'll never know. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm not worried about them. Of course. Yes.
The hypothetical of people. What if we actually fought COVID is
you'll never know,
because you'll never know.
It'll never happen
because they're never trying.
And again, fuck these people, fuck the Supreme Court, fuck every single one of the people on it, especially. Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, definitely the Catholics. Also fuck John Roberts, who voted against this. With the other three.
Yeah, every member of the Supreme Court is bad. Like they're all awful human beings. That's why they're on the Supreme Court. So yeah, fuck all of them. But the point is, and what they're pointing out is, this is all bullshit anyways. So
look, this is such a layup. This is such a layup.
They're not wrong about it.
This is another element of this is just the fucking political ineptitude and inadequacy of Democrats, like that they didn't see this coming, that they could be so blind to like their own bubbles, and like that they couldn't see like the massive fucking like brick wall they were heading toward, trying to close down churches in this country. That's the thing you can't take fucking lightly and just go like, hey guys, the science, like that's not how the Constitution works. I'm not saying it's good, but like that's not a viable strategy to go like, hey guys, the science says we have to close down churches. Okay, the scientists are telling me we have to close down churches. I think that's gonna be a real fucking winner in America. Jesus Christ.
And again, I think your point is right, which is in a world where everything was shut down and people were paid to stay home, and basically we just went on a 30-day, 60-day, whatever lockdown. If this court gets to, or this case gets to the Supreme Court, it's a lot harder for the Supreme Court to turn around and say, oh, well, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just single churches out, because they're not singling churches out at that point. Right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, they have to use a different argument. If they wanted to do the same thing, they'd have to use a different argument.
You would have also established at that point a complete state of emergency. Yeah. Which really would have put pressure on the court to basically
to not hear the case.
Yeah, because they would have to blow up that state of emergency fucking, call, right? Which, you would have had to do at every level of government.
Exactly.
It would have been politically impossible for them to essentially blow that up. But because...
Well, we'll never know.
But because done,
everything you are saying is true. This would be a very different scenario. And on every level, this is a failure of people like Andrew Cuomo.
And to be fair for, all those, as a fellow Catholic, for all those Catholics out there, I mean,
I was baptized.
Yeah, we would follow the rules, right? I mean, we wear the horsehair shirts, so of course we put on a mask.
Make it spiky on the inside or something.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to make it like punish them somehow to put the mask on. It'd have to.
What about the Hasids, though? I don't know. We have to get a guest to talk about cracking that nut. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just have horsehair masks, to go with their horsehair shirts, and everybody's got to walk barefoot to the church.
Sure, man. I don't know.
Well, that was cool, but there was some local politics that happened that weren't totally awful as well, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a good place. Not totally awful. So we didn't talk about this last week because we were so busy. Actually, we had some plans to, but didn't work out. Thanks to everybody for listening to the Thanksgiving extravaganza, by the way.
Mm-hmm. We know that it made your Thanksgiving go extra well, that whenever your, parents would be talking at the table, you would just turn it up on your phone to your Bluetooth speakers, which you have blasting
on your boombox that you had on the table, your Bluetooth speaker that was on your plate instead of the turkey you refused to eat. Oof, man. Yeah, I didn't go to Thanksgiving. Actually, I didn't go see my family. because I worked all the week before and got notified like on Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe, I guess Tuesday, that someone who we had worked with on Friday, the COVID officer, sent out an email saying, "Oh, someone ended up testing positive." Mind you, we had to get tested.
Mm-hmm.
Like they paid the company. I've talked about this before on previous jobs. The company paid for everyone who was working on the job to like 2 days before or a day before, like within 2 days before, get like a person. They paid a person to come around to where you were in the world and give you a $200 vial to spit in that they took to go get a rapid test that you heard about later that day. But someone still tested positive after the show. So I was quarantined, to which my father, when I explained, I was like, I've been working, I've been potentially exposed, it's too risky. His texts were just, huh, wow. Meaning not, wow, that's wild that you may have been exposed and are having to quarantine. Meaning like the most like exquisite playing dumb like you've ever witnessed. I know this because when I last saw my dad, he made a rare trip to Seattle with his new lady friend, incidentally. And they were saying things like, wow, just been seeing a lot of masks around. Everybody's wearing masks. What's that all about exactly? Like, I shit you not. Like this was like last month. Mm-hmm. Just like, isn't that interesting? God, that's real interesting. Not trying to have like a take on it. Not like being like, oh, what a bunch of sheeple. But just going like, just like real playing dumb. Just like, gosh, that, wow. God, my golly, I never. And so that was the response to like, I'd rather not. I'm the sort of socially conscious thing to do is not infect you, my family, even though I would like to and would like you to die of COVID. If we're honest, the socially responsible thing for me to do is not like actively do that. So no, I'm staying home. But that's a bit of a tangent because anyway, thank you. I am free and clear. I got myself hooked up to the e-meter. They say I'm clear. So everything's all good. That came through. Yeah, Thetan free. You guys Thetan free, Colin?
No.
I could have told you that.
I hope I'm.
You don't need you need an e-meter to read Colin's Thetans. It's like humming off of him.
Off the charts.
Well, luckily, yeah, exactly. Greg got this notification on Tuesday that he might have COVID or been exposed to somebody that had COVID, which I'm sure he was very groggy when he got this message because, of course, he was at my house on Monday till 3 a.m.
Oh yeah, recording the Thanksgiving spectacular.
Episode. The longest recording session I think we've ever had, just face to face, spitting in each other's mouths. We were that meme from Facebook that's just the two like NPCs just blowing blue and red shit at each other. We were that for 6 hours, and then the next day, Greg's like, "Oh, I can't come by to grab some Thanksgiving food because I might have COVID." And we're like, "Oh, cool, thanks, dude."
So anyway, we would have talked about this last week, but it just didn't make there wasn't enough time in the 3-hour Thanksgiving special to talk about the new Seattle city budget passed by the city council for 2021. You guys stoked about this? You guys hyped?
Better than I would have expected.
Well, okay, so the basic gist is this. They, the week before, Tammy Morales had put forward a proposal to freeze hiring at SPD that was shot down ultimately. That, people felt betrayed by that. Ultimately, I think, it had to do with the fact that they were about to pass this budget. And the budget, the like big headline item is cuts 20% from SPD. And that is broadly, as these things go, true. Of course, it's basically along the lines of the mayor's proposal from like June or whatever, which cuts most of that by transferring whole sections of SPD out of SPD. Good things, but things that, are fraught and not necessarily, best. Basically, things that are good. 911 transfer out of SPD.
Parking enforcement transferred out of SPD.
That's big. Then the Office of Emergency Management. These are now going to be,
victim advocacy transferred out of SPD.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty small one anyway, but yes, but it's good.
A funny one of definitely, have a cop is definitely who you want to lean on when you've been through trauma. So
we've basically known we've known for a long time this was going to happen because this was basically the mayor's proposal from Midsummer. So because basically from the point of view of your lib technocrats, they're like, fine, they're not dedicated. They don't see themselves as dedicated right-wing fascists, right? So they don't need to hold the thin blue line on everything, right? They're to them, it's the same thing. It's we need 911. We don't care. Someone like Jenny's not interested in the fact of what you can do once you do remove 911 from SPD. But it is an opening. It weakens the power of SPD as an institution slightly. They got less people, they got less money, they have less control over certain things. But it's all in the implementation. We talked about these proposals when they first came up. Yes, it's good. 911 should be run on its own terms but are they going to literally not allow any cops in the room ever taking calls? Hopefully, but I don't think that's in the budget documents. And what else, are we going to do all the things? But it gives an opening. Now you can have programs and you can have training and you can have priorities for 911 dispatchers that do not align with SPD and its prerogatives. You could do that. That is now a possibility. Doesn't mean that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the people who, and this is the case with all that, it's very possible that what will happen, certainly, I think they really need to make a push with the 911 stuff that they send those cops back to SPD, reassign them in SPD and hire new people, not just transfer the cops where their paycheck comes from and give them a different badge. That's a real possibility. That could be what happens. They need to not do that. They need to send those people back to SPD, reassign them and hire new people. We know that's not what's going to happen with parking enforcement. It's a bunch of parking enforcement SPD people are going to get transferred over to, executive services or whatever it is that they're I think that's the department for fiscal services
department, which makes a lot more sense.
Maybe that is. No, maybe it's something else that is that one.
It doesn't matter, but yeah, I mean, all these groups could just be reconstituted in a different department in exactly the same way that they currently exist, right?
Which
would be bad.
Oh, look, there's some ways it could be really bad if what you do somehow if what they do is transfer all these people over, but they're still on their police contract, and what you do is now you have this fiefdom of people working for Department of Transportation who are all ex-cops who still have a radio. They can talk to other cops who are still on a cop union contract that now has employees on it inside of the Department of Transportation. That sucks. There's a lot of ways this could go bad. But again, these are all beginnings for implementation to be done by a future administration. This is going to be the first year of it next year, which is going to set a lot of things in stone, which sucks. But what do you do? It does seem, it's kind of hard to parse all this, but it does seem like they have limited. They took specifically money out of the hiring budget and staffing budget for, so they can't replace all of their losses, their attrition in 2020. All the casualties, that they suffered, all those dead cops, they can't rehire new ones. No, actually a lot of cops have left Seattle, which is cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know. that stuff is all kind of shaky to me, and it doesn't necessarily seem like there aren't ways around it. And how strong any of that stuff is, or how far reaching it is. It did seem like in the measure as passed, it cut the staff funding down to a level that they wouldn't be able to hire any new people. And they did also, in addition to that, eliminate some whole positions that were unfilled at the present moment, so that they would not need to be.
Yeah, they literally struck the money from like funding these vacated positions. I mean, they can't be filled. The other thing that they did, which is important because it just means it's going to be another fight here in about a month or two, is they recommended 35 out of order layoffs.
Well, I mean, it's right there recommend. I mean,
yeah. So, but the thing is, as is noted in the Stranger article on it, that the council can't even do that on its own. It has to be negotiated with the police union, thanks to the shitty fucking the police contract. So, that would have to be a fight that the council would want to have with SPOG. We'll see.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's going to have to be a fight the fucking administration is going to want to have. Of course, they do. Mm-hmm. The thing is, they do have to renegotiate the contract coming up. So, that is going to be an opportunity that's the real thing here. These are first steps. This isn't a bad first step in a new budget that moves all this stuff out. It makes it possible to do a few other things. If they now take this momentum into, like, best case, they take this into the SPOG renegotiation and say, this is a new ball game. You have to eat a bunch of shit, including we're getting rid of a bunch of the worst cops. And you have to eat that. Are they going to do that? I don't know. Is any of this going to matter? Because, it's not anything super inspiring. It's just it's baby steps, basically. And it is basically the mayor's plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's obviously not enough. It's not going to do what the 50% demand would have done, which was significantly break the power of the police department over the city. It's not going to do that.
No.
So that's out the window. But it is something when I think nothing was what was previously on the table. Now we'll see what happens. Now, the one thing to note, though, is as the economic crisis gets worse here, especially since the Biden administration and its cabinet picks has shown every intent to go full austerity, just like everybody said would happen under a Biden administration, but whatever, has shown every intention to go full austerity, is that you're going to see a lot of cities, cut police budgets, right? And they could frame it in a way of like, look, because of Black Lives Matter, because of unrest around policing and police violence and stuff like that, we're going to cut police budgets. When in reality, it's just a budget cut that's going to have to happen as austerity sweeps over the land, right? And every city has to establish an austerity budget, right? There's just not going to be, police budgets are so overblown. There's just not going to be the money to keep them going.
Well, if that ends up happening, then in a way that'll be a real victory for the uprisings, because there's another possibility too, in a different scenario where there is massive austerity. It is across the board except the cops, and the cops funding goes up. Like we've seen that already in Everett, very sort of nakedly. Where everything else is cut, which is what we've had for the last, 40 years. But specifically, you could see that in this crisis, specifically, a lot of people will want to do that. If that doesn't happen, if, more sane policy prevails, then that'll in itself will be a victory, a small victory for the Black Lives Matter movement, the defund movement.
Yeah. I mean, the only problem would be that I think you need a conscious effort to defund the police, because the problem is, as we climb out of this crisis or whatever, it just means that the police budget will be the first thing that balloons again.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, there are cities, Seattle, I think the police budget is like 30% of the budget. There are cities where it's approaching 50% of the budget. And at that point, there's not a lot you can cut that isn't the police at that point, and have like a functional city government.
Yeah.
At that point.
Unfortunately, there's at the same time, there's not going to be money to sort of build new systems and services and plans, you know.
I mean,
so
what
to
you
replace it, to make like communities work without it.
What you could see is cities buckle under austerity, which happens and has traditionally happened and all that, right? As cities buckle under austerity, as infrastructure goes to pot, as crime rises because people's living conditions are worse every day, all that kind of stuff. As that happens, that could be just used as another excuse for a law and order campaign as well, right?
Yeah,
so
in 2035,
yeah,
it'll be just even more right-wing law and order,
Yeah, it'll be, the problem isn't the fact that the bridges, a bridge collapses every rush hour randomly, killing 30 people, or that there are no like health and human services departments in existence anymore, and disease runs rampant through every city as we are dealing with the 5th COVID plague to hit the United States. Every other country in the world doing fine, but we're in the 5th one. All the stadiums have been converted to corpse storage and stuff like that. And the response could very well be, this is because we cut the police budget, so we should go more austerity on everything else and just increase the police budget more. After all, they're going to need tracked vehicles to go over our roads now, since they're all undrivable or unworkable,
Oh my God. They're going to need tanks. Holy shit. They really are.
So.
Oh my God. I should mention that like the only person to vote against this package was Shama, holding out, staying strong for a 50% defunding number. So shout out to Shama, of course. Like I said, it's pretty weak ass shit.
When she did argue,
this is essentially the mayor's plan.
And Swat argued kind of to my point too, that basically that the budget shouldn't be an austerity budget. The budget should be, funding should go up for everything except the police. Only cuts to the police.
Right, because again, this was the entire city budget for 2021 that they passed, which the mayor has indicated she will sign a couple weeks from now. But
8-1, so they're going to override her veto if it comes down to it.
So, which means she'll pass again. So it's the whole budget citywide. It's not just the cops. And again, what they did with the cops was 90% just Durkin's plan.
Yeah.
So no reason for her to really veto it. They got off pretty easy. So it's like baby steps in the right direction. And Shama did the right thing by saying that and voting as such. But the foremost member of the city council, the
image not here.
Yes, the cipher candidate, the invisible councilman, we go to him when we need like real like sage wisdom on this stuff. So I think Colin wanted to read us what he thought about this whole process.
Yeah.
This is in the Times, right?
Yes. So this was an opinion piece that they let him run on the 23rd, which I believe, Greg, you said was the day of the vote, right?
I think so, yeah.
The vote was on Monday. Yep.
Yeah. And it's titled Positives, Negatives of Seattle Council Budget.
Well, the man knows how to... I guess it's the Seattle Times does that, but they know how to put a headline together. I'm already interested.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, but on the other hand, by Alex Pedersen.
Yeah, extremely Seattle. And this is, in case you needed to be reminded, this is special to the Times.
Oh, don't gotta tell me.
In a statement to the media shortly after our budget committee last week, the other 8 Seattle City Council members celebrated amendments made to Mayor Jenny Durkin's $6.5 billion proposal. Finalizing a budget feels like an achievement, especially given this year's challenges: a pandemic, a recession, a racial reckoning.
I remember that.
Thank you, Charles Manson.
I survived the racial reckoning, and all I got was this T-shirt.
The homelessness crisis. Wait, that was special this year? The West Seattle...
Yeah, that's never happened before.
The West Seattle bridge closure. I love that that's on equal footing with the pandemic. And
the racial reckoning.
Yeah, exactly. And an antagonistic Trump administration, just so you know, he's on your team.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, I did not feel like celebrating.
Oh, he's doing some story time now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Put the NPR music on behind this.
The amended budget has substantial negatives. It shortchanges our bridge infrastructure, fails to revamp public safety with a plan, and reduces accountability for our response to homelessness, all while giving city government a pay increase instead of investing more in our most marginalized communities. Ultimately, I voted yes for the final package for reasons I'll discuss below.
I like this. I voted for it, but because I am, never let me say I do not blow with the wind. But at the same time, I've been told by Widmere that these are my problems.
What a bunch of gobbledygook. Again, like everything's just so removed. Everything's so mediated. Everything he says here is just like reduces accountability for our response to homelessness. It's like, what the like, again, like that's like 3 layers of like, he's not saying we'll house less people or more people or whatever. He's just completely full of shit as always.
First, some key negatives. Shortchanges our bridge infrastructure. I am thankful to voters who approved transit funding to maintain extra bus service. Now, let's protect the bridge network those buses rely on to safely connect us. The cracking and closure of the West Seattle Bridge should have been a wake-up call. The audit of all Seattle bridges I requested confirmed many of our bridges need more maintenance. Yet this...
That audit gets done like every year. I like the one that I request. It's like, we've known that the bridges are fucked for a long time, buddy.
You requested a copy.
Yeah.
They were passing them. He saw them going around. And he's like, "Oh, excuse me. Can I get one?"
Yeah.
Yet, this budget excluded the fiscally responsible proposal to substantially increase investments to support our bridges. In a city defined by waterways and ravines, another forced bridge closure will stall multiple modes of transportation and our
mostly
local
cars.
Economy.
But I mean, like he's right. I mean, this is the American problem, right?
Yeah.
All the infrastructure that we rely on
was built in the 60s.
Yeah, when
they used to pay for things.
Yeah, it has never been fixed ever since.
Well, look. The truth is, there's nothing the city can do about that shit. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like that shit was built by the federal government. Every last bit of it was dollars from the federal government. So no, we're just going to let it crumble.
Well, because of the very stupid way our government is organized. This is the way this stuff has always had to be repaired, which is the city's going to have to ask the state for money for it. The state's going to have to get that money from the federal government, and it'll go through this like very stupid, like Plinko machine of, funding grants and things like that eventually make their way back down to the city, usually, with some sort of loan involved and stuff as well. Right. But that's how that's got to, like, the city literally just can't fund the crumbling infrastructure. It's too bad. Every single one of the bridges.
It's too big.
Yeah. Every single one of the bridges needs to be replaced. Like, our city budget literally cannot fucking
The city
handle
of Seattle did not build the West Seattle Bridge. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. And I will push back on the thing of like, well, we don't need car infrastructure anyways. But the problem is like, we have no alternative, like, and literally no plan to build one. So we can either repair the fucking bridge or do this other thing, but there's like nothing at this. There's literally nothing that can be done at this point about any of it. The infrastructure is going to fall apart.
Like that's
where we're at.
This jerk off wants the city to spend money on this shit.
Yeah,
you're fucking nuts.
Yeah, you can't afford it. You literally cannot afford it.
You'll never be able to afford it.
Yeah.
Again, the city did not build this shit.
Yeah, you'd have to basically, confiscate. Which, maybe I'm for this now, but you'd have to confiscate Amazon and completely liquidate it. And then you could use
something
that
only the federal government of the United States could really do effectively.
Yeah. But
all transportation infrastructure was built with federal dollars.
Yeah.
Either directly or indirectly through massive grants for that for decades.
Yeah. This is silly. This is ridiculous. I mean, just come on. The city, every bridge in the city needs to be replaced. I mean, could you imagine the fucking cost of that? Like, that you're going to find that in the city budget. Give me a break.
Cuts before new safety plans. I strongly support more police reform and effective alternatives to traditional policing. Such as
already it's got my bow tie spinning. I already feel like this is a lie.
such as sending mental health professionals to help people in mental health crises. But we need the plans in place first. Even after the Seattle Times analysis indicated our police department has fewer officers per capita than other cities, and after we learned highly trained officers are leaving at a faster rate, the council chose to permanently eliminate police officer positions without first finishing the formal community input processes created by the council and mayor.
I love this because community input is a process that has no end, essentially, right?
It's just so wishy-washy. Like he hasn't. The last sentence here is like they haven't done the process. It's like, well, where do you actually stand? Like he's just saying. I'm just saying. It's just off the top of my head. The data is some cities have more cops per capita, and it's like.
Who care?
Like, fuck off! Like,
yeah, who care?
Like, are you saying you think we need more cops in Seattle? Because what you said at the top was, I strongly support more police reform and effective alternatives to traditional policing. Any effective alternative to traditional policing is going to mean less cops, dude.
Yeah. Hence the term alternative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of cops, something else.
But it's the usual smoke and mirrors. Where he's basically just saying
all he does is smoke and mirrors.
It needs more study, which, is politicians
the oldest thing
don't do it.
Yeah.
The budget also sidesteps a real issue, the urgent need to revamp the unjust, inflexible, and expensive police union contract. Redoing that contract is how we can save money, improve discipline, honor good work of first responders, and deploy unarmed professionals for lower priority calls to reduce harm. Police contracts are one of the keys to police reform, said Community Police Commission co-chair Reverend Aaron Williams at my budget town hall. When you're talking about changing anything from the discipline of officers to them receiving pay, it all comes back to contracts.
Yeah, I mean, I think on this show we'd agree the police union should be broken into a million pieces, but I suspect that we have a different motive behind it than
he's just saying
Mr. Pedersen here.
All he's actually saying is this budget sidestepped that. Well, that is later, and the budget for 2021 is now. So he's just saying, like, he's literally just saying, well, the real reform is going to be with the police contracts, so we shouldn't have done anything now in the 2021 budget. We should wait to, we should see what we can get out of the next police contract. Well, and will you fucking argue for something, anything? Yeah. Like this is just throwing shit up against a wall. Like this is nothing.
Part of the budget cut idea too, right? Is, this is, the idea of like, we're going to cut SPD's budget by some significant amount, preferably 50%, right? Part of that is you're using a tool that's been used to, quite frankly, gut social institutions forever, which is you're forcing a crisis with the police union, basically, that will have to be resolved, right? As opposed to letting this continue to jump
as
along.
we discussed, they are now going into next year's renegotiation with a much fucking stronger hand.
Yeah.
Because they have this budget that says all this shit and that cuts all these positions, and that even suggests that they be allowed to shit can 35 officers out of order because they suck and need to not be cops.
Yeah, and it does open up the idea, right? I mean, not that the city would ever fucking do it, but it does open up the idea where the city could just say, like, our budget says we got this much for the police. Your contract says you want this much. Oh, bye.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to have to walk away. Bye.
Yep.
Get out. It would be very funny, the police, since the police are used to enforce like closed, shop lockups and closed shops, or like, it would be very funny to see the, police department just locked up in the morning when they'll show up and be like, oh, sorry. But, one thing that could come out of, the austerity season that we're going to get to go through here is you could see right-wing sort of politicians like Pedersen and, Republicans in other cities and stuff like that. You might see them attack the police union. There's not a lot of unions left in this country, right? And they might go after them. Just out of the pure insane ideology of like right-wing anti-unionism and stuff.
And austerity.
Yeah. And also just conservatives are rats in a barrel. They will eat each other. Like, if there's nothing else, they'll eat each other. And I mean, that is one of those funny things that you could see play out. Now, the thing will be on the left is not to fall into the trap of being like, got to support unions and go out and support your police union.
Well, again,
fuck them. Let them eat each other.
Again, this could be the fruit that is born in this coming austerity crisis by the uprisings this year. If this inoculates this country and the left in particular against exactly that, as these like realities are emerging where every fucking municipality in America is going to be absolutely fucking strapped in this depression level catastrophe, what has happened over the last year with regard to police is going to have an effect on that. Now, it's going to turn out different everywhere, but it's not hard to imagine that burden of these uprisings will be felt still. That in places where maybe they might have cut otherwise without this, they may have cut all other services and increased police budgets by 10%. Maybe they'll keep police budgets flat. In other places where they might have kept police budgets flat, maybe they'll cut them another 10% as part of their broader cuts and use it, use it for cred with Black Lives Matter. In places like Seattle, where there is like a sustained effort that even has some support in the city council, maybe they will actually use this as this crisis emerges to hammer out a better contract with SPOG.
It's worth noting that Pedersen wouldn't be saying stuff like, I strongly support
police
reform, stuff like that, if he didn't have data in front of him saying that, it turns out actually like a huge portion of Seattle
ultimately
reformed.
Ultimately, it could add up to dog shit in the end. I mean, we still may get crushing austerity and the boot of the police state.
It's the most likely scenario.
Yeah.
But there is an opportunity that has opened up. And like I said, I mean, Pedersen wouldn't be saying stuff like this, again, like saying this, I do believe in police reform and all that, if that wasn't the popular position.
Right.
If the popular position was, actually, Seattle needs more police, we love our cops, then he would not give an inch to Black Lives Matter or anything like that. He'd be saying which, you see in like some right-wing cities,
absolutely,
right? They're, mass terrorists or whatever and all this shit. So, but this shows that must be the popular position.
Well, he has to include that line in his gobbledygook, in his word salad of nonsense where he really takes no position except like that he's actually against cutting any money from SPD. He still has to insert this, which is, again, maybe in the end adds up to fuck all, but
sure,
it's
better
another
than we
step
were a year
forward.
Ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everything else is worse, but yeah.
That's how it is.
Moreover, expanding accountability reforms requires ample staffing for supervision and community policing.
Boo, fuck off. Fuck off. This is so fucking tired. Shut the fuck up. Get rid of all management level at SPD. Only people working for SPD should be beat cops. That's it.
They actually have to form an anarchist co-op if they want to continue existing.
They should all report to the school board for their daily assignments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yet council's amendments cement a sharp reduction in officers before proven alternatives are in place. I'm concerned the remaining...
The alternative is less cops.
The remaining officers will be stretched thin and responding late. Our former police chief, Carmen Best, was clear. I do not believe we should ask the people of Seattle to test out a theory. Crime goes away if police go away. That is completely reckless.
And again, I mean, this is just more of the smokes and mirrors stuff. And one, I mean, you could obviously turn this on Carmen Best and say, so you're asking us to test out a theory that crime goes away when we add more police. By the way, a theory that's been proven wrong. So at least the less police theory is not proven wrong yet, right? But at the same time, I mean, again, just so much more bullshit of like you have to have a proven alternative out there, as if you have to have two parallel criminal justice systems in existence before you can choose which one works and which one doesn't, right? I mean, it's just basically arguing that you actually can't do reform. It's impossible.
We literally have to invade a country and build it from like we have to filibuster a country somewhere that we don't like to to rebuild as an abolitionist paradise just to show it's possible. Is that so we have to do empire?
Yeah, basically. But yeah, and the other part of it too, which I think it's one of the things that people should prepare themselves for, because it's definitely going to happen, is we know the data, which again, this is the smoke and mirrors whenever they talk about 911 response times, which is that most calls to 911 actually don't require police at all and like have nothing to do with policing. But I fully expect SPD to do a little work strike on 911 calls and basically sit on them, particularly in neighborhoods that they blame for, what's the budget cuts to SPD or whatever. Right. So like Central District, areas like that. I do expect that the police are going to probably squat and not respond to 911 calls and drive up the response times. And then they'll try and use that as an excuse to increase their budget. And you're just gonna have to tell them to fuck off. Like,
the council and our next mayor needs to be ready to tell them to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
To fire as many chiefs as it takes.
Well, if reduced...
wouldn't that be a great way to reduce the number of SPD cops? To just keep firing interim chiefs like once a week?
It's like becoming an officer in Starship Troopers.
Yeah. No, it is. Like you get promoted and then you have to walk the plank a week later because you won't fucking follow orders and you keep saying stupid shit. That's how this should go down until they're down to sergeants like running the department. And it's like, oh, great. We'll just actually manage the department with actual civilian managerial control, not cops. Mm-hmm. Cops can be the people on the beat. Well, the people sitting eating fast food in their cars.
And that is a political choice the city can make, right? Is they can make a spectacle out of the police department and basically, line up a fucking chief every week to fucking fire and publicly be like, we're giving SPD orders, they're refusing to do it. So here's the next chief we're firing, right? Which would build support for things like maybe it needs public ownership, right? It needs like a public board in charge of it and things like that.
But whatever. There's a whole, you need to build actual like working class power that can form, if you want to do these kinds of reforms in municipalities, that can form a movement, that can form a political party that can staff this kind of shit and do basically like patronage, like with political ends, but whatever.
Reduces accountability for homelessness response. At a time when homelessness appears to be growing, a majority of my council colleagues unfortunately used the summer and fall budgets to dismantle our city's interdepartmental navigation team that engaged with unauthorized
This is the
homeless
accountability.
encampments.
Shut the fuck up. What a fucking utter fraud this piece of shit is.
Well, and I love that, for a guy that's all about accountability and all that shit and proven alternatives or all that shit, what proof is the navigation team did anything other than fucking shunt people from one location to another, right?
We're talking about cops here.
I know.
The least accountable fucking people in America. Yeah. What are you talking about? You utter disgusting fraud.
Yeah. And again, unfortunately, they use the budgets to get rid of this thing that has never fucking worked for its stated purpose. Now, we know what its real purpose was, but never worked for its stated purpose. Although I do love that he talks about how they engaged with unauthorized homeless encampments as opposed to all the authorized homeless encampments that the city allows, right?
Dope, dude.
Yeah, fuck off, man.
Didn't that cut happen simultaneously with the regional group?
The new regional authority. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, yeah. Again, he's just throwing shit up again. He's just like, this is just chum. This is just a bucket of fucking chum that is in, like, I don't know. That's almost like wrong, though. He's trying to chum the water just with a bunch of random, fish heads, but none of them have any pungence, Like, this is not going to draw any kind of a crowd to it. No one is, getting riled up by this. He's trying to just throw out all this, confusing back and forth nonsense, but it's also fucking bland.
Well, that and it's Jenny Durkin's letter to the city council about Shamus wants many calumnies against her, right? It's all of his grievances, but just hidden in this bullshit fucking mealy mouth language. But I mean, the main read from
utter
this
passivity.
And his position is, I want more cops, and I want the police rousting the homeless. Like, that's their function, right? That's the two reads that we have so far on this.
Instead, I believe we need to allocate more resources to our Human Services Department to track and evaluate the effectiveness of such changes so we can ensure we are truly helping people.
So again, just the resources, instead of going to homeless people or anything like that, the resources all need to be eaten up by bullshit accountability projects that really do nothing but sit on their hands and make graphs every 6 months.
So why did I vote yes? People are yearning for functional government. If the budget does not pass, nothing gets done. No budget.
You still could have voted no. It would have passed, dude.
No budget is perfect. Our constituents have diverse and conflicting views. Are these sentences related? A budget with positives and negatives is a natural result.
I like this.
Wow, what a fucking dork.
People believe different things. Budgets have positives and negatives.
It's like the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
The ebb and flow of the universe.
God, this rules.
What a fucking weird dork.
This budget benefits every council district, including benefits to Northeast District 4, which I represent. So now we're into real tiny bullets here. Allocates funding to examine the aging University Bridge. My man loves examining bridges. He's all about that shit.
Well, again, I mean, the funny part about this stuff, though, is I feel like every year in the Seattle Times, I read a report on the bridges in the city. And every year the report is, hey, they're all failing. I don't know what this is like.
It's a thing he can get out and do. And like,
no, this is COVID response stuff. It's looking like you're doing something while doing nothing about the fact that it's all crumbling around you.
You can go put on a safety vest and like go look at a bridge with some Department of Transportation people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he has to find a new place to hole up for the next 100 years. Next bullet requires an assessment of 911 response times as our police department changes.
Yeah, like I said, expect the police to sit on their thumbs for fucking that shit, and that to become a huge talking point over the next year.
Regardless of the positives or negatives, City Hall must work together to make sure the budget invests your tax dollars in a sustainable and effective manner to produce positive outcomes for all of Seattle.
Basically, you know what's great about this is like, he's basically saying like, I voted, even though, you know, I didn't like everything in this bill, I voted yes, because government has to function, even though it didn't need my vote to pass. Because the only person who voted against it was Shama Swan. And really, I think spiritually, this whole line is a dig at her.
No, it's not spiritually a dig at her. It is literally a dig at her. Why don't you read the last line there, Colin?
Oh, is there more?
Yes, there's one more little paragraph here. And to my constituents who ask, why did you vote the same way as Shama Sawant? I didn't. She voted no.
Dun, dun, dun.
Wow. So I called that. But is he saying maybe this is like an anecdote he's had? Or like, is he saying because the headline will be everywhere city council slashes 20% from SPD budget, that he's going to get that, you know, like, oh, you voted for the Sawant cutting SPD. And the joke is actually she's the one who voted against it. That's pretty. He's actually kind of onto something there. That is kind of funny.
I mean, it's funny, but I think it points to what is actually going to happen here, which is, and it is already happening, which is that particularly the conservative members of the Seattle City Council, but on some level, like every member of the Seattle City Council is simply going to run on not being Shama Sawant, right? Which we saw in the last council race. And Alex Pedersen in the last council race, you know, despite running against another actual human being, all of his campaign material was about Shama Sawant, right? And I mean,
yeah,
I think it literally is just a ticky-tack way of saying, just so you know, me and Sawant, we differed in our vote. Like, she voted one way, I voted the other, right? And I think that's just going to be, it'll probably be on a scorecard in the next council election. It'll just be like, Sawant, I voted against Sawant, you know, 99% of the time or whatever, right? Will be like the headline on their stuff.
I mean, Yeah, that is the aisle. That is the actual like aisle down the city council. There's the Democrats on one side and Shama Swan on the other. I mean, that's how she puts it. So yeah, hey, cool. Thanks, Alex. Old buddy, old pal. What a pile of shit. Well,
cynically, that last comment, I think he's being serious. I suspect that people are approaching him because nobody is following local politics in any real way. No one knows how anyone voted. No one probably knows any other council member besides their own and Shama Swan. So we have a pretty ignorant, honestly, population with respect to what's going on with these votes. So
yeah, we have a much more mentally healthy population than, say, ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, to some degree, because most of them are just jerking off to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden or whatever, or like, screaming into the TV about Air Cheeto and all his transgressions for the last 4 years, while the bridges fall apart and piers literally fall into the water while people are working on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like this has been another exciting episode of Seattle Sucks. We do have a new patron, right, Colin?
Yeah, we do. Gunner Zippy, welcome to the fold. Or a new freak emerges into the hallowed halls of freakdom.
Hell yeah.
There's a sucker born every 2 or 3 weeks.
And if you want to be a cool guy like Gunner Zippy, feel free to go over to our Patreon account. Give us money.
Yeah, feel free. Anytime.
It's just that easy.
It is. There's content there. We have such content to show you.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, like for instance, that time that we got 8 other people together in a room when you could still do that sort of thing and watched Battle in Seattle.
Yeah.
A movie I do not recommend, and on second watch was also not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a Patreon episode that we have since released wide, and you can watch it for now. An anniversary. I think that's today, right?
21.
So it'll be not that anymore. But
The Battle in Seattle, old enough to drink.
we watched it for the
20th
20th anniversary. It's 21 years old now. You can listen to that episode. We talk all about it and the stupid movie Battle in Seattle.
Yeah. So enjoy it.
With some pretty interesting and knowledgeable people.
Yeah. With people who I think one person was even there.
Yes.
As well as somebody who's
2 people.
battle
More
in
than
Seattle.
one.
2
Yeah.
people were there, I think.
So,
Maybe 3.
so exciting stuff. All right. Well, thanks, Gunner Zippy, and everybody else. Feel free to follow Gunner's lead and give us money. We need money. Greg, he's run out of LaCroix and La Cola. He needs to be, living the lifestyle he's become accustomed to. So go out.
Wait, I was going to give the wassail recipe.
Oh, I did in the Patreon.
Okay, guys, if you want this year's holiday beverage recipe in time for the month of December and all its festivities, I guess you'll just have to turn into the Patreon. I wanted to give it out to everybody, but Brian said no. So
Said no. All right. Now that that's happened, we should say bye.
Bye.
bye.